Did you just see that? We spent out in the snow because under the snow that's ice and it makes it slippery. So we just want you to be careful out here and just understand, if you see the snow, we need you to go slow.
Southern Draw Law. My name is James White, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, former police officer. Police unions are some of the most powerful, corrupt, and unilaterally purposed organizations that exist in American society. Their sole function is to essentially shield police officers from the otherwise negative consequences of their actions, specifically actions taken during the course of their duty. It is an extremely powerful lobby. They have a lot of influence over criminal justice reform, the strengthening of laws to protect police officers, and a host of other things. But their unilateral goal and function is to protect and defend police officers. If you haven't been able to imagine up to this point scenarios where that amount of power and influence could be weaponized, I invite you to check out this story. Hamon Brown was in Houston, Texas during last week's snowstorm. That was the first major snowstorm that had hit Houston apparently in several decades. While he was there, he was out in the snow close to a parking lot, and he observed a marked Houston Police Department cruiser doing donuts in the parking lot of some mall or some commercial property. As most of us would do, he pulled out his camera phone and he took a short video. He posted the video to social media, had some short comments about it, and that was the end of it as far as he was concerned. As a result of that video, of course, the public became aware of it, started pushing back on the police department. These officers are being disciplined, and the police union in Houston took it upon themselves to take a shot at Mr. Brown because in the video he has a cracked windshield in his personal vehicle, and so they took a little shot at him, made a little joke about how to get a corporate sponsor or a window repair sponsor to help him with his cracked windshield since he wouldn't get any money for being a snitch from the Crime Stoppers. I could make the argument that that's because in the mind of the union, anytime a police officer commits a crime, it isn't really a crime, but nonetheless, that's what happened. So I'm going to show you Hamon Brown's video, and then I'm going to show you the union's initial response to the video, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about what was going on. So this is the video that Hamon Brown posted.
Y'all look at HPD, man. Look, they out here doing donuts, man. They ain't got nothing else better to do. Look, that's HPD. They out there spinning. He stopped now. He see me. He see a car cover down, yeah.
And then this is the follow-up post that the union made on Facebook about Hamon Brown's cracked windshield. Now that was probably at least something that it could have been chuckled about and, oh, you know, whatever. But they didn't get the amount of attention that they wanted as a result of posting that picture, so then they posted this video. Then they posted another video of Hamon Brown and continued to sort of retaliate against him for what they saw as snitching on the police. So we have a news story out of ABC 13 in Houston that's going to tell us all about this back and forth between Hamon Brown and the police union.
The union is being pretty lighthearted about this whole thing, and that really falls in line with what they've done thus far, which is essentially troll Hamon Brown when he went public and spoke about this video. Brown says he fears for his safety and doesn't appreciate the union airing out his dirty laundry on Facebook. The union isn't denying the officers were in the wrong, but they said they were working long shifts during the storm and, quote, got a little silly at the end.
I didn't really think it was gonna go viral like it did.
Nor did Hamon Brown think this video would set off an internet war between him and the Houston Police Officers Union.
Just leave me alone. I don't want no problems.
When Brown first spoke to ABC 13, he said officers were having reckless fun and doing exactly what they told citizens not to do.
We're human. We like to have a good time just like they do.
You know, I could understand this guy saying we're human, you know, we like to have fun like everybody else. Had they not retaliated against him, I think that would be a perfectly reasonable argument to make. Hey, this is the first snow these guys have seen in 30 years. It's still stupid. It's still irresponsible. And oh, by the way, it's still completely antithetical to the video that your public relations department put out on Facebook and featuring patrol officers with 30 years experience telling people to slow down and be careful. So it's really irresponsible for officers to be doing this when, you know, their public relations department or their community services division or whoever it was that put out the video is doing some work to try to keep the community from doing this type of stuff. It doesn't look good. Nothing wrong with the video. I mean, you're doing some social media presence, you're going out, you're trying to get people to slow down. It's a direct contradiction when you have patrol officers that are doing this stuff. My major concern has nothing to do with patrol officers. You know, sometimes you get young guys out here, you get them in the car, whatever. It's easy for this union rep to be lighthearted about it because he's neither the officer who did the donuts and got in trouble, so he's not facing any consequences for that. He's also not Hamon Brown, who's experiencing backlash from the police department. He's just a guy who has a platform who experiences no consequences whatsoever. He can say whatever he wants. So it's easy to say, well, it was lighthearted fun and we're just human when you're not the person who's in the middle of it on either side.
The police union proceeded to poke fun at Brown for his cracked windshield on Facebook and called him a snitch.
He took it a little serious, and then things may have went off the rails a little bit.
The attacks got more personal and included reposted videos of Brown ghost riding his own vehicle.
You can't do what he does in public and then turn around and call out others.
It's really messing with me because y'all posting all my business on social media. It's like y'all doing a lot to me, and y'all really getting me scared, like, because I ain't did nothing. I ain't did nothing wrong. Y'all was in the wrong.
Brown says it sets a bad precedent when police ask citizens to speak up, and when someone does, even over something minor, the union goes after them. Brown wasn't the only Houstonian to catch officers in the middle of snow stunts. Another video was posted to social media showing a marked patrol vehicle in the Galleria also doing donuts.
They know what they did was wrong. It's been taken care of. And for the public to be concerned about complaining on police officers, there's no concern there. You can complain all you want. We don't go hunting people they complain on police officers. That's not what we do.
Community activists say it begs the question of the purpose of airing out Brown's dirty laundry and how that may impact public trust going forward.
You wanted to send a message to all other young men in this community and everywhere else that if you expose police misconduct, we're going to target you.
So a couple things I thought were worthy of commentary. The incredibly arrogant statement that this union rep says, you can't do what he does in public and then call other people out. Here's the problem. You could have substituted the people in your mind for the police officers and said the exact same statement and the same thing would be true. If by he you meant the police officer who was doing donuts in a patrol car in public in the snow, yeah, you're right. You can't do that and then go pull people over and hold them accountable for doing that same thing if this is what you do in public with public resources. But the problem is he wasn't talking about the police. He doesn't have enough awareness due to his arrogance and ego to understand that the exact same thing he was trying to say about Mr. Brown was true of the police officers. Now, let me be clear about something. What Mr. Brown did was irresponsible and stupid and reckless. And had he had a kid in the car, or had there been somebody walking across the street, there's zero chance that he would have been able to stop that vehicle and not harm somebody. And that's wrong. There's no two ways about it. And the police department, after having had their department come out and say, be careful in the snow, having two separate incidents where their officers were caught on video driving and doing donuts in the snow, was also irresponsible and reckless, and very easily could have crashed the cruiser into the side of a light pole because they lost control, or God forbid hit somebody unbeknownst to them who was getting ready to cross the parking lot, or whatever. They're both parallel in that regard. But where the fact patterns begin to diverge is when you consider the characteristics of what's going on. One, Mr. Brown is driving his vehicle, and he's the one who would have to be financially responsible if the vehicle crashed, both for the damage to his property and for the damage to anybody else's property. And more importantly, had he done this in front of the same Houston police officers who were caught doing donuts, they would have stopped him and probably taken him forthwith to jail and arrested him for reckless driving. So that's his side. On their side, they're in a vehicle funded by tax dollars. It's the taxpayer that has to foot the bill for any damage that they do in the process, and there's nobody there to hold them accountable. Do you guys really believe that the consequences that they're experiencing right now are on the same level as the reckless driving arrest and likely conviction that Mr. Brown would have experienced had he done this in the presence of a police officer? If you believe that, then I've got some oceanfront property that I'm able to sell you in the center of Podunk, Tennessee, via transfer of a quitclaim deed. Just let me know. The truth of the matter is that this is not a major thing. Negative attention got brought to it more than necessary because of their response. It's a metaphor for how they do their job. It's obvious that this union does exactly the same thing that street cops do. This is a perfect playbook for exactly how they police the streets of America. They take a scenario that probably started as a traffic stop, and then they take somebody who gives them a little bit of pushback, and they escalate, and then they further investigate, and then with whatever information they find, they retaliate. How is that different than what we see in every single YouTube video on these YouTube channels? It's not. And the problem is that it's easy to say, well, it's no big deal. You're not the one that is going to be harassed by police officers. You're not the one whose business is out on social media. Nobody even knew who these guys were. They took a situation that was relatively anonymous, that they could have kept themselves and said, we're dealing with it internally, which is what they said. And their reaction to that was essentially to pick an individual and put their information out and pick on them individually. They're just not the same. They're just not the same situation. And how do we as citizens trust that they're going to respond when nobody's watching in an appropriate way if, when given the opportunity, this is the way they respond and use their resources over a relatively minor incident? In closing, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think what I would like to see is for these agencies to just stop lying to the public. And what I mean by that is that they come out and they say one thing and they mean something different. They'll say, we hold ourselves to a higher standard. What they actually mean is that they hold themselves to a different standard. I have a friend of mine who I went to high school with. We've lost touch over the years. He was a police officer. He had a great career, worked 25 years in Lexington, Kentucky, retired. He's a super great guy. His wife's a judge. They're really good people. He's been a friend of mine since we were in high school. And he told me two things, and I know you'd probably be surprised to learn that 15 and 18-year-olds are out here having deep philosophical conversations. But I remember specifically when I was 15 and he was 18, and he was getting ready to go off to college. We were having a conversation about something, and he said something that stuck with me to this day, which I think is kind of funny. I'm the opposite of this, but I get it. He said, I'm a pessimist because if you're a pessimist, you're either constantly right or you're pleasantly surprised. Makes a lot of sense, right? I'm an optimist, but I'm constantly disappointed, right? Because of that. But the other thing he said was that he introduced me to a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson that has literally been something that I've kept with me my entire life. And that is that what you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say. It's a more elegant way of saying that your actions speak louder than your words. Now, the words of these police agencies are, we hold ourselves to a higher standard, but their actions are that they actually hold themselves to a different standard. So just as a thought exercise, I want you guys to give me a scenario, and I'm kind of talking out of my ass here, okay, as far as because I don't have statistics, but I'd like for somebody to enlighten me and give me a scenario where a police officer has done the same thing that a regular civilian has done, and the consequences that that police officer experienced are greater because of the higher standard that the officers are held to. And again, I'm open to being wrong. I'm wrong every day. Just ask my wife. I don't think it's ever happened. I don't think there's ever been a situation where a police officer has been punished more harshly than a regular citizen has been for the same conduct because police agencies hold themselves to a higher standard or hold their officers to a higher standard. And I can think of innumerable times where a police officer does something that is acceptable and defended, and a regular person would have or did go to jail for that exact same thing. And I'm not talking about scenarios where there was this Florida deputy that I'm going to do a video on in a couple days that had access to the evidence locker and stole dope and sold it and all that stuff and got a 17-year prison sentence, right? I'm not talking about that because a regular citizen wouldn't have that access. I'm talking about just regular stuff. Regular crimes, police officers commit them every single day, and most of the time they don't get caught. And if they do get caught, they don't get held to a higher standard. At worst, they get held to the same standard, but that's not very often. And the problem I have with the union rep, among many, is that he doesn't see it as a problem with an officer doing it because in his mind, when an officer does it, it's not a crime. Whereas there's a quote that can be found on the internet from Governor Greg Abbott when they signed a piece of legislation into law targeting street racing, where he said, if you're going to be doing donuts in Texas, you're going to be arrested and taken to jail. And this is what you see out of police officers. And again, it's not like the end of the world. I'm not trying to suggest it is. It's just it's insulting. It's insulting to the public. It's insulting to the taxpayer who foot the bill. And there's no reason for it. So what I've learned is that there are essentially 3 elements that have to happen in order for a police officer to be held accountable. And if any of these 3 elements fail, nothing negative happens to the police officer. And that's what I mean by they hold themselves to a different standard. If a regular person commits, well, let's just say reckless driving, you have to prove that they were driving a vehicle and that they did so in a way that showed a willful disregard for the safety of other people. Depending on the jurisdiction, it varies in language, right? But essentially, that's what you have to prove. If a police officer gets charged with reckless driving, you have to prove all of those same elements, but also, you have to have the police officer elements, which have to exist before a police officer can get in trouble. And these are the police officer elements before any agency is going to take any action against a police officer. Number 1, it has to become public knowledge. If it doesn't become public knowledge, nobody ever talks about it, nobody ever does anything about it, no big deal. Number 2, it has to be something that makes the police department look bad and that they cannot defend. Because if it's something that they can say, well, it was within our policy or whatever, then they do that. And number 3, there has to be relentless public pressure, because if it gets thrown into what I call the outrage blender and everybody stops talking about it in 2 weeks, nothing ever happens. Think about all the cases that we see that were discovered because of routine body cam checks by some officer doing an audit. Things that happened 6 months ago. You'll remember Trooper Cotton in Tennessee, who was decertified for making ghost stops that were found out about 5 or 6 months later while somebody was doing an audit of his body cam. So what was the element that failed there? It wasn't public knowledge. And then also notice that when it's a police officer they want to get rid of for internal reasons, because he's not a good subordinate, or he doesn't do what they like, or he rats on other police officers, or he doesn't toe the line, like Trooper Cotton. And I'm not defending him. He should have been decertified. He should have never been a police officer. What I'm saying is, if you actually watch the story for the video that I did on Trooper Cotton, he was not coming to work, he was not doing his job, he had a house fire, he was being lazy, and they were mad at him and trying to get rid of him. And so what did they do? They made it public knowledge about the ghost stops. Things that we would never know about if it wasn't for that. So whenever it's good for them, they weaponize those elements. They make it public knowledge so that they can say, we can't defend this conduct, and that will cause the public to give them relentless pressure, which they have to cave to. You know, they had to do something, all this stuff. But they're happy to do it, and they're happy to easily satisfy all those elements when it's good for them. So I'll just say, I'd really just rather them say, we hold ourselves to a different standard. We think our job's pretty hard. You guys don't get it. We're going to do what we want to do unless the officer's conduct meets these 3 elements, and those are 3 elements, and then we maybe do something, and then maybe we won't, and then maybe you'll just shut your mouth and deal with whatever we give you, because that's what they really mean, and that's how they really feel about you. Anyway, that's all for this one, guys. Hope you got something out of it. If you'd like to support the Southern Draw Law channel monetarily, I don't offer any type of memberships, but I will leave my Venmo and PayPal link both here on the screen as well as in the description. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment on the video. Check out some of the other videos on the channel and leave a comment on there as well. Until I see you again, take care, always film your interactions with the police, and keep your evidence to yourself.